always be marketing. And I want to echo what Mark said. Thank you for, not coming. So I appreciate the fact that you're here. I would like to take your picture so that I have a verbal okay to use your image in my social media. And would anyone not want to be a part of that in case you turn and look that way? We just have the back of your head. All right? All right, so before we start to talk,
send my check.
there you go. Smile for the camera. So this will be on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter shortly. All right. I've been giving this talk for a number of years. For those, who in the room would like to write a book someday? All right. One of the strategies is this blog the book. So how many have blogs? Okay. Start writing intentionally content that you can repurpose later. I've been giving this talk for a number of years, and I always thought I could turn it into a book, but I never had the motivation to really put the effort in. And then I was hired to give this talk in LA to a group of CFOs of Fortune 100 companies and their spouses at Terranea. Anybody ever been to Terranea? I didn't even know this place existed, but I'll tell you, it's awesome, right, Jim? Huh?
Yeah.
It's really pretty. Anyway, so I used that opportunity to actually write out the talk. Normally I'm extemporaneous. Today I know some major points that I want to hit, but I'm going to play with the audience and we'll just kind of spend an hour together going over the content of the book. But I actually took the time to write out what I was going to say. And because I didn't want to say anything that a room full of CFOs could figure out was incorrect, right? So I had to really document it because I know the type of people that would be in the room, Gene, the technical people who are used to making things add up.
Well, there's others beyond CFOs here. We have heads of HR, heads of IT, heads of operations.
Okay, so we have a very discerning audience, which is awesome. It's awesome. I'll try not to misspeak here as well. The content of that talk, when I looked at the paragraphs that were the content to support each slide, and I put it together and I said, oh my goodness, I have some percentage of a book completed. And that was the motivation to turn this into a book that was launched in March. And it immediately became a hot new release on Amazon.com, which was cool. You do all this marketing stuff to get some awareness and sales. Also, we were #1 in our category. Two of the categories that were really important for us were workplace behavior and workplace culture. Because I wrote this book to help leaders of companies to avoid, reduce, or mitigate unintended consequences. Because I believe an engaged workforce is the #1 competitive advantage that companies that I work with have. And I work with companies from a couple $1 million to about 20 to 30 million, mostly here in Orange County. And it's a competitive advantage because 68% of the US population are not engaged at work. And most of those are in the big companies. Anybody ever work for a big company? Okay, you know what I'm talking about. Not everybody's whistling on their way to work, right? Right. So if you can have an engaged workforce, you can have a competitive advantage. That's really hard to copy. You can copy your website, right, Angelo? You can copy your marketing message. You can steal the competitor's color scheme, everything. Stuff that isn't trademarked, and even their logo a little bit if you want to, especially if they haven't protected it. But you can't come back from a place and go, you know what, I want to have an engaged workforce, people that are excited to be here, that are really enthusiastic about the company itself. And I think, and we found in researching this book, that if you can't predict the future of your company consistently, if you tell your employees, we're going to do this behavior and we're going to get that action, and they do this behavior and they don't get that action, people start to think you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And it's really hard to be motivated to take the task and do the job for somebody that your boss says, the last 3 times, if you do something, we're going to get a result, and they didn't get the result. It's like, really? You want me to do that again? Figure out what really is going to happen. They expect leaders to be clairvoyant. So let's move on. Let's get this party started. The California Coastal Records Commission was responsible for cataloging the California coastline. So they took a series of pictures and they put them in an archive. They had 12,000 pictures of various California coastlines. This one happens to be of Barbra Streisand's house. And when Miss Streisand found out that they had a picture in their archives of her house, she sued them for $50 million, claiming an invasion of privacy. Now, before she filed the lawsuit, very few people knew this picture even existed. Fewer still put the effort in to find it. But once the lawsuit happened, 1 million people looked at that picture. Right? The unintended consequence for Miss Streisand once her case was thrown out of court. Can you see my screen all right? All right. She had to pay the attorney and the photographer $155,000. Oops! But that is only one order of unintended consequence. The second order of unintended consequence, and one that's going to last longer, don't do it now, but Google the Streisand effect. Her name is now forever linked with this idea of frivolous lawsuits. That's an example of an unintended consequence of a decision that you made. Mark mentioned that I've written a couple books. My first book is Critical Mass, The 10 Explosive Powers of CEO Peer Groups. It's about why tens of thousands of business leaders get together in these monthly sessions to sharpen their saw, to work on their business rather than in their business, as Michael Gerber says. My second book, about guiding principles. I've asked the question of a number of CEOs, tell me of all the things you've learned in business, do you have an overarching philosophy for how you lead and grow your firm? What's your guiding principle? It's in its third release. There's 130 executives that have given us input. The founder of Smash Burger is in here, if anybody knows the chain Smash Burgers. A number of other Yard House restaurants, Steel Platt is in here, a number of people. We're going to talk about killing cats leads to rats, but I also want you to know that we're currently researching the best practices for small and middle market companies to grow successfully and create sustainable competitive advantage. It's hard for small companies to move through the growth curve and keep having a competitive advantage that scales. I do a radio show. Some of you have been on my show or will be on my show, and I'd like to connect with all of you on LinkedIn. That's my preferred social media platform. So if you would be so kind as to reach out to me, and I will definitely reach out to you because I have a nice target list now and that spreadsheet. Thank you, Gene and Mark. You'll be getting a connection request from me. I hope you will accept it. In 2008, Tata Motors was super excited, the executives, with this idea that they were going to release a car for the masses. They could build a car for less than $2,000 and sell it anywhere in the world. They thought this would open up vistas of new markets for them. They had a conservative estimate that they could sell and ship at least 20,000 units a month of this product. They thought in India, their home market, they could get people off of motorcycles into cars because of the price point. They were driving it to be able to sell it for $1,500. And so when they released it in their home market, they released it as the Tata Nano, the cheapest car in the world to buy and own. That marketing message, Angelo, coupled with some early quality problems, like some of these cars caught fire, cemented in the consumer's mind that this was a cheap car, maybe a little dangerous too. People didn't want to be seen driving around the streets and what everybody would know is the cheapest car in the world to buy. They still sell these cars, they never achieved anywhere near 20,000 units a month. Matter of fact, the best year, they sold less than 20,000 units in the entire year. Whenever your strategic decisions touch the customer and the marketplace, you got to be really careful about unintended consequences of what you're saying and doing, because it can set in the mind of the consumer. My goal, my BHAG, Jim Collins' big, hairy, audacious goal, is to have a positive impact on 1 million lives with the talks that I give, the books that I write, radio show, and these peer groups that I lead. I lead peer groups here in Orange County. Gene, Angelo are in one of my groups, which is really great. Trusted Advisor Group. Earlier in this century, that's kind of weird to say, right? Earlier in this century, the global automotive industry was freaking out about having to meet the new stricter EPA regulations on emissions. Historically, they had to meet emissions requirements, but they also have to meet consumers' demand for performance and power and fuel economy. And in Germany, the Volkswagen executives were scratching their head because they had one engine in particular, the 2.0 liter diesel engine, that they tasked the engineers to figure out how is this dirty little diesel engine going to meet the EPA requirements. They finally realized through much testing that they couldn't meet the requirements with that engine. And that's unfortunate because that platform is in a lot of cars for them. Not just in Volkswagen cars, but in Audis and Porsches. So they decided that they would install some software. Anybody involved in software here? Okay. That would sense when the cars, whatever model, was being tested by a regulation of EPA or whatever, versus on-road performance, and they would provide a set of data to the tester that was falsified, that made the engine look cleaner than it actually was. It worked so well that in 2009, the Jetta TDI won, with that engine, Green Car of the Year. I have to imagine that the executives of Volkswagen were starting to get a little bit worried. Maybe we did this too well. In typical German fashion, maybe we over-respect this cheap device. Such was Dieselgate. You might have heard of Dieselgate. Because California and some other states started to say, hey, we don't believe these tests. And so researchers out of West Virginia University proved that there was on-road performance and there was testing performance. And at first, the Volkswagen executive said, hey, nothing to see here. You guys made a mistake. You're in West Virginia, for God's sake. You made a mistake. But ultimately, the unintended consequence of Volkswagen's decision to write software that cheated the tests is that the CEO of Volkswagen had to resign. 6 of their executives were indicted. Over 10 million cars around the world had that engine in it. It cost them over $11 billion in fines and cost to remediate the problem. The second order unintended consequence was that the German economy started to wobble. Volkswagen is a huge part of the German economy, both in the products that they sell and their supply base. And governments around the world started to scrutinize Volkswagen and their business practices. Unintended consequences can have a dramatic effect on your business. Also, some memes started to come out poking fun at various aspects of what Volkswagen does. Sorry for you Patriots fans. How are we doing so far? We got about an hour of this. Is this okay? Okay. All right.
Take it easy on him.
I respect the Patriots and all they've been able to accomplish. I'm a Steelers fan, so what can I say? The law of unintended. This is Neil Ferguson. He is a professor at Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. Pretty good schools. He's written 14 books on history. And Time picked him as one of the 100 greatest thinkers in history, and he says the law of unintended consequences is the only real law of history. In 2008, Starbucks was looking for a way to increase their in-store sales, something to complement their premium beverage line. They came up with an idea to sell sandwiches, heated, warm sandwiches. Maybe some of you have had those. Well, the first iteration of those went out, and the executives in Seattle were looking at the financial results, and they were going, holy hell, it's working. In-store sales are up, and we can attribute it to the sandwich. Woohoo! Good genius move. But when Howard Schultz found out that the heating methods that were being used, and the meats and the cheeses, and the way they were baking the sandwiches, stunk up your local Starbucks, because the cheese would melt onto the heating filaments and just overpower the beautiful aroma of coffee. He did a brave thing. He suspended the sale of those sandwiches, knowing it was damaging their brand, until the design team could figure out how to put different sandwiches together with different ingredients and a little different heating elements so that they could reintroduce heated sandwiches in the store without polluting the aroma. So hopefully, have any of you had a heated sandwich at a Starbucks recently and enjoyed it? Thank you, Howard, for your leadership. Mathematician Edward Lorenz was studying the hurricanes, and he was looking at the early data that predicts and sort of controls the intensity of the hurricane, how it got formed, and ultimately the path it would take. And he noticed, by looking at just subtle changes in the atmospheric conditions when a hurricane gets started, it has a huge downstream effect on the intensity of it and the path of it. He postulated in a paper the flapping of this little butterfly, thousands of miles away from where a hurricane could start, could actually have the unintended consequence of impacting that hurricane's path. And hence, the butterfly effect was coined. That's part of the reason why I believe last year, Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria, the paths were so hard to predict because there's so many variations in the variables. Vodafone was looking for a way to sell high-margin products to complement the services that they had. And they hired Ogilvy and Mather to come up with a marketing campaign. And that little guy there is Zuzu. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Zuzu, but in the markets where they ran those commercials, people loved this little guy. Couldn't get enough of him. As a matter of fact, they did a series of commercials very quickly because he was so popular and there was so much buzz about Zuzu. The executives at Vodafone were just sitting back waiting, going, oh man, the high margin sales are going to roll in, baby, because people love this guy. But you know what happened? The unintended consequence? They never rolled in. At least not at the rate that they thought. So Ogilvy and Mather had to admit that while they had successfully created a character that was beloved, he was so popular that he overpowered the marketing message of what the brand was trying to get out. I don't know if you've had that experience, Angela, with any of your brands. Never. I'm sure you've created very powerful marketing campaigns. In 2012, the executives at Red Lobster and their parent Darden Restaurants were looking at a way to improve the economics of their restaurants. And so they decided, based on some information they knew that Chili's had done, that they were going to fire all the busboys. They were going to demote some of their servers to a position of service assistants, and they would ask the waitstaff to work 4 tables instead of the customary 3. People that look at the restaurant industry said, whoa, wait a minute, this might be bad for you. You know, customers might not be as happy, your waitstaff might feel overworked. Heidi Shore, who at the time was the spokesperson, said, don't worry, we figured this out, we're going to be just fine. 9 months later, the unintended consequence of that decision was people were disappointed in the service at Red Lobster. The service staff felt overworked. They couldn't keep up with the new demands. So Red Lobster had to bring back the busboys and give their servers 3 tables instead of 4. Whenever your decisions touch the marketplace, you really have to think about the unintended consequences of why you're making this decision and make sure that a second order unintended consequence isn't bigger than your first order benefit that you're working for. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Robert K. Merton. He taught at Columbia University. He's known as the father of modern sociology. He invented terms, created terms that you might be familiar with. Role model. Anybody ever hear of role model? Okay. Have you heard of self-defeating or self-fulfilling prophecy? Those are also his terms. What about reference group? Ever hear that term in any way? Okay. This guy is responsible for that stuff. When I came across a paper that he had written in 1936, out of which came the term, the unintended consequences. He studied large-scale social systems, and what he realized is, in large-scale social systems, invariably there are unanticipated consequences that can happen. The law of unanticipated consequences was born, but over the years we've changed it to unintended consequences. When I saw that paper, I thought, holy cow, what is a company but a society? A little society, right? We have power structure, we have a boss, we have a hierarchy, we have people doing what Dr. Merton called purposeful action. We can take his research on large-scale societies and bring it into the business setting. And that's what we've done with this talk. I've added to his model this idea of a decision ecosystem. Think about a decision ecosystem as that environment around every executive, around you, that helps you make strategic business decisions. Because that's what I'm talking about here, strategic business decisions. It's the people, the books, the podcasts, the external resources that you leverage to make sure you're making well thought out strategic decisions. Dr. Merton's research found 3 types of unintended consequences that occur. The first one is a negative effect. It's an outcome that's counter to what you told your employees it was going to be, and it's bad. It's worse. It's worse than what you had anticipated, and you've got to figure out how to get out of it. The second one is a more subtle unintended consequence. it sows the seeds for a future problem. On the surface, it doesn't look like it's a bad thing, but later on you realize, holy cow, that goes back to this, which goes back to this decision. All of this information is on that handout. The big ideas from my talk are on that handout if you want to. On the back is lined if you want to write some notes, and hopefully you will. The final one is a positive effect. It's better than what you had expected. He called it serendipity. I think of it as luck, but hope and luck are not a strategy. You don't want to make strategic decisions based on hope and luck, right?
Right.
Right. Can I get an amen? Amen. Thank you very much. I'm going to tell you a quick story. Because I think anytime you tell an organization or your people that we're going to do this purposeful action to get that outcome, and that outcome is different, even if it's better, it could be a problem for you. Let's say Angelo, Gene, and I own a company that makes these laser pointers. And we have a new one, right guys? And we think this thing's going to sell 1,000 units a month. We're all excited about it. We start building our inventory, set up our supply channel. We're going to sell 1,000 units a month. And when we launch it, holy cow, we're selling 1,500 units a month. The three of us are high-fiving each other, just excited because we've been so smart to create this new product that everybody loves. This is the time that the smart executive walks the four corners of his or her building in business. Why? Because let's say it's Saturday morning, like today, right now. And maybe in the plant, there's some people on the line who are making these parts and assembling this, and you're going, why didn't Gene, Angelo, and even Rick know that this was going to be this successful and have us build these extra products during the workday when we could have done it? Yeah, I'm getting overtime, but it's Saturday morning. I'm missing my daughter's soccer game, and I'm here making this widget. And oh, by the way, when I came in this morning, I didn't see Gene's Tesla in the parking lot. Why isn't she here helping me? So even when your outcomes are serendipitous and better than you forecast, make sure everybody in the company is excited about the good news as you are. Right? Yeah. Can I move on then? Yeah. This has been, Wells Fargo since their founding, a great and well-run company. They have been one of the most valuable brands in global banking. As a matter of fact, after the Great Recession, or sort of as it got started, they were credited with not making the risky business decisions that other banks made that caused the Great Recession. They were riding high, ladies and gentlemen. In the retail banking division, they had a mantra of 8 is great. It started when then CEO Stump wrote an annual report, 8 is great. And it makes perfect sense in retail banking. Anybody been in retail banking in this audience? Okay, the most expensive part of the customer relationship is the acquisition phase. So once I have you, Tom, as a customer of mine, I gotta sell you more credit cards and services because that's where the margin is. So it makes perfect sense. The unintended consequence of that mantra, 8 or great, is what the Wall Street Journal said created a high-pressure sales culture. Imagine that within the retail banking division of Wells Fargo, where employees were regularly berated, demoted, or even fired for not consistently making 8 as a goal for every client. Ultimately, what happened is they created fraud. Are you aware of this? Anybody a victim of it? 2 million fake accounts were started in the retail banking division because they couldn't meet the goals. This is CEO John Stump. He was called to Washington, D.C. to testify for how such bad business practices could happen under his leadership. I don't know about you, he doesn't look that happy to be there. Does he, you? And none of these people in the background look like they want to be there either. Shortly after this session for CEO Stump with the Congress, he decided to retire Zine from Wells Fargo, leaving $40 million of unvested options. Kerry Tolstead, who was the president of the retail banking division, also decided it was probably time for her to leave the company, either on her own or encouraged to do so, leaving $14 million of uninvested options. That was the first order unintended consequence for Wells Fargo. The second order is that it woke up the media, the elected officials, and maybe worse, the regulators, to realize that inside of Wells Fargo there's something going on that allowed this to happen. You might have seen earlier this year, they received from the federal government the largest fine in the history of the banking industry. $1 billion, with a B, dollars fine for their business practices in their automotive and home loan division. People are watching Wells Fargo. And I think to some degree, the consumers are also seeing the brand differently. Dr. Merton said the most obvious limitation to the correct anticipation of the consequence of action is provided an existing state of knowledge. What's he mean? The decision ecosystem. The better that ecosystem is, the less likely you are to have an unintended consequence of a strategic business decision. He identified 5 in large-scale social systems: ignorance, error, immediate interest, basic values, and self-defeating prophecy or self-fulfilling. With your permission, I'd like to step through each one of those quickly with you as in a business context. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Sure. All right. If not, we can call it a day now, and we can get out the sun's out of the time. The first one is ignorance. What we saw in researching for this book, that ignorance happens in business that might cause unintended consequences, is when we don't really do the research required to make a strategic business decision. Or we ask people to do the research and we don't look at it. Because we think, hey, we're smart, we can make this decision. Or maybe we've seen this before. This is just like the situation 3 years ago. We did something 3 years ago that got this result. Nothing's changed in the marketplace in 3 years. They'll just do the same damn thing, and I'm sure we're going to get the same outcome.
Remember those days?
Thank you. Usually I say millennials, that's a dial-up modem. Right?
What's the dial?
Exactly. But in the 1990s, the hotel industry was freaking out because we knew business travelers with our fancy schmancy laptops could now check our email, right? AOL Online, CompuServe, other services. And so we'd get to the hotel, and do you remember that you always wouldn't get a connection when that beeping and booping happened? Do you remember? I mean, I didn't get in. Oh, I didn't get in. Oh, the third time I got in. Oh, good, great, I got my emails. The decision of the industry to limit our desire to use the connection to check our email was to institute a fee called a connection fee. Figuring if they charged us to check our email, what? We might be less likely to do it. Well, didn't they realize we're on business travel with a business expense? And once we got connected, we thought, hey, I've already paid my connection fee. I'm just going to leave the laptop on. I might become inspired to write an email to somebody, or I might get an interesting email from my boss, right? Because this is kind of new technology at the time. So the unintended consequences of the strategic decision to charge us a connection fee is what? We stayed on longer, exaggerating the problem for them. The second condition is error. Error builds on ignorance, and in business what we think we saw, and we see it every day, is the data that we get has mistakes in it, and we don't know it. So we go through the act of collecting the information, but there's a math error in the Excel spreadsheet or some assumptions that aren't right. We've also seen that unfortunately, at times, people present intentionally the wrong information to the decision makers, especially in larger companies. For whatever reason, it's not in their best interest to give them the facts. So you're making decisions, what, based on bad data. Johnny Walker, anybody drink Black Label, whiskey, scotch, any of that stuff? Okay, good. They are a global enterprise. They're in 200 countries around the world. They're the third largest by volume, number one by revenue, $4 billion a year because of the premium price of their products. But that scale and scope didn't protect them from an unintended consequence. In Japan, Black Label was the number one selling Scotch whiskey. And so the European executives decided, hey, we're going to lower the price a little bit, just a little bit, because a lower price will create more volume, and what will happen? Angelo, lower price, more volume,
Higher sales.
Hey, Gene, I should ask you, you're the finance wizard, right? When they did that, guess what happened? The unintended consequence of that decision is their sales plummeted. Why? What they didn't realize at the time in Japan, these kind of products were ranked 1 to whatever largely on price. This was the most expensive product. It sat at the top of the list. Apparently, much of the black label sales in Japan were attributed to the fact that if you're an important person to me, Tom, if you like this, I'm going to buy you the most expensive brand on the shelf. I can afford it, and he clearly deserves it, right?
You bet.
When that was no longer the motivation, people stopped buying the brand. They, to their credit, realized this. They raised the price. Over time, believe it or not, they got back up to the top spot, and even more impressive, over time, their sales came back. But this is a cautionary tale, because I'm going to tell you, we got way more examples of times that that didn't happen than it did happen. Remember the nano, right? You can set in cement in people's minds, it's very hard to change. The next condition is immediate interest. This is a picture of a potential salesperson, because many of us think that salespeople are only concerned about what?
Money.
And themselves. But what we found in business is immediate interest can show up in short-term focus. Public companies, what's the #1 metric? We got to make our numbers, or else our stock will get killed. And our stockholders aren't going to be happy. And they're our #1 stakeholders. So downstream decisions affected unintended consequences of driving short-term performance. But you know what? For those of us that work in middle market and private companies, we're not safe from this, because what we see is you overreact to one area of a business decision. You don't look at the whole problem. You got a customer that's mad, or you see an opportunity somewhere, and you focus on that to the exclusion of what else might happen. The battle between Samsung and Apple in the phone industry is one of the coolest battles going on in consumer electronics these days, right? And we as consumers generally benefit from it. We get faster processors, we get higher resolution, new screens, better form factors, maybe even a longer battery life. Thank you, Gene. In 2016, it's been reported that the executives in Korea for Samsung were driving the phone division around a lot of things, but one of them is get your large format phone out before Apple gets theirs. And so they did. To much fanfare, in August of 2016, the Galaxy Note 7 was released. 1 month before Apple got their large format phone out. But in that month, the early shipments of the Galaxy Note 7, consumers were reporting, hey, this thing runs hot. No, I mean, it's really hot. The battery's like on fire. And so they called those first units back and they shipped out updated units. But you know what? Not only were those units hot, there were reports that they did catch fire. By the time Apple started shipping their large format phone, Samsung was in the throes of a huge problem. Because not only were they being reported this way, but when Nathan and others on social media said, hey, my car caught on fire because my Galaxy Note 7 exploded, they had a major crisis. And so by the end of the year, they decided to stop selling the Note 7 because the damage to the product was irreparable from the market's minds. The FAA even said, hey, if you got a Note 7, you can shut it off and put it in your briefcase. You're not coming on this. First, you're not coming on this plane. You can shut it off, put it in your bags, check it in the hull of the plane. You're not getting on this plane because there could be a catastrophic explosion in the air and we're not going to take the chance. They recalled every unit that they had shipped in that period of time. 2.5 million units around the world they had to get back. They had to hire 700 researchers who tested tens of thousands of phones. It cost them over $5 billion, this problem. Right? That was the first order unintended consequence. The second order unintended consequence is Samsung has a sister division to the phones, which is a battery division. And only some of the batteries in the Note 7 were from their own division. But the quarter after they stopped selling the Note 7, that batteries division saw a decline in their revenue of 20%. Because customers buying even other types of batteries, not phone batteries, said, hey, you know, we think we'll just wait a little bit and, you know, get your batteries later after you prove that that's not the problem. Basic values is what Dr. Murphy saw as another condition that can cause unintended consequences in large-scale social systems. And in business, we see this coming up in a couple areas. Has anybody ever heard of the term sacred cows? Blind spots. They block you from seeing what you need to see to make a decision. Even groupthink, right? We work really hard to get consensus in business, but if it creates this false sense of consensus and people don't question things anymore, unintended consequences can happen. We also see it when we as executives make decisions and we ask people to carry out what Dr. Merton called purposeful action, and guess what? It's counter to their belief system. Or you have a channel partner that you're trying to get to do something, and they're not motivated by your same motivations, and so they don't do what you think they're going to do. In Washington, D.C., in 2009, they had a problem in a certain area called Ward 6. Anybody been to D.C.? Anybody been to the Capitol? All those places? Ward 6 is that area. A lot of dignitaries come there, and you know what else? A lot of tourists come. And they were having a problem because people would be going into the liquor store, buying a single can of beer, taking it outside, consuming it, causing some raucous behavior that called the police to come in and kind of deal with it. And maybe most annoyingly, they would do this. They would have to relieve themselves, and they would do it in public places. So the city council said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to ban the sale of single cans of beer, because if you can't buy the beer, you won't get intoxicated, and you won't have to relieve yourself as much. We've solved the problem, ladies and gentlemen. What they didn't really fully understand was how valuable those single can sales were in the liquor stores. This was a cash sale and a high margin sale. So the liquor stores banded together and they created the 2-pack. There was no ordinance that prevented the sale of 2 cans. What it did cause is people came in together now. Angela and we each bought beer. And now we're hanging out together. The calls for the police actually increased after this ordinance was put in place.
That's cute.
Final 5. Thank you. I try to find interesting stories. I hope we're finding this interesting, as well as informative. Self-defeating, self-fulfilling prophecy. In our research in business, this comes in when, guess what, the executive team that makes a strategic decision doesn't really make a commitment to it. They're a little bit wishy-washy, and they're not really fully invested.